already a bit late and we've got a lot to get through, so can we start this meeting very soon, please? If you'll all take your seats, as many of you as can attend. Okay, thank you. Some ground rules here. Where we are up to in the process. We are now looking at a draft of our response, and this is the ALAC response. It is not the RALO response. The ALAC response to the review. We are looking at Maureen's draft. She used the basis for the draft. It was Alan's draft. It was revised basically on the instruction of everybody around this table. It is a much tighter document and carries out, I think, raises most of the issues. So that's the document we will be working with. Now, if anything has been left out, if anything has been left unsaid that you think should be said, you really have from now until Wednesday evening to say something. Where we're going from here, we're going to take away all of the comments made today on Maureen's draft. Tomorrow, as you are aware, there is an open session with items talking about this review, and we will, at least some of us, will be there taking notes, and any points that are made can be incorporated into our final draft. The expectation is that we will have a pretty much final draft by Wednesday evening. That's not saying it's completely perfect, but it's saying that all the elements should be there. Where we are up to now is just the final gathering of everybody's thoughts. And I first of all have to thank everybody. First of all, I was really pleased with all of the people who have responded on the various, whether it's in email or Skype or on the Google Docs or on the wiki or whatever. I was very pleased with the number of people and the thought that was put into it. I'd like to personally thank Alan for getting all of those thoughts down on paper, because that was a huge job. I'd also like to thank Maureen, because getting through and refining it to something that is a little bit more compact without losing much. And as I said, I invite everybody around this table, if we've left something out, to raise your hand now. But the work today is just on Maureen's draft, and that will be put up on the screen. We are working with Olivier. Olivier is finalising the other response to the review, which is the RALO response, and it's important that that's finalised and that we work with Olivier to make sure that we're not actually saying contradictory things. I don't think we are. I've had a look at the comments so far. They've been very useful. They've taken a more RALO-centred, as they should, viewpoint, but that's fine, and that's actually important, because a lot of the recommendations had to do with structure, and the RALOs had to speak for that structure. Before I go any further, and I think we will have on the screen Maureen's version. Is this true? Thank you, Evan.
Sorry, it's coming. One moment. I'm loading it now.
Yeah.
Can we get it distributed? Not all of us can read on the screen.
It's also been sent by email to everybody. Is that right, Ariel?
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, that's just, I wanted a confirmation.
Yeah,
that was
Ariel
Thank
had
you.
my firm instructions to do that, and she's such an efficient person that it's been done.
Cut the crap, let's get on.
I would like, though, to just pass on a really interesting comment made to me by Tom last night at the gala, when I started to talk about the different characteristics and priorities of the RALOs, and why it might be difficult to have a uniform set of rules for at-large membership. And he said to me, which I guess surprised me, or maybe shouldn't have, but when he realised the different ways in which the RALOs operate, he just looked, he said, well, in that case, the EM model won't work. And after I picked myself up off the floor and smiled sweetly at him and said, "That's a very interesting observation." I thought I would pass that on. And I think one of the things that we now need to put into the draft is to stress the different ways in which the RALOs work, thus making it very difficult to have uniform rules. That's just my suggestion and my little passing on from whatever. Now, I think what we'd like to do, and Cheryl, with your suggestion, how would you like to proceed? My suggestion is we just go by statement, and if people want to add anything, they can. But first, Tajani, I've got two things to watch. I've got hands up here and hands up there, because this is how everyone can participate. I will try to keep my eye on both.
I'll help with the list, don't worry
Yeah.
about that. And this is traditional in the face-to-face aspects. So we just have to-
Tajani, go ahead.
Thank you, Oli. Tijani speaking. I would like to give also an information. I spoke with Bob, and he told me that they will fix it or something like this. He already is convinced that there is something to be done on what they provided. So I think that they are now more and more convinced that things are not like they are thinking. Thank you.
Sean.
Yeah, thank you. This is Sean for the record. So I also had some interactions with some of the members of ITEMS yesterday. I think it's better to interact with them when we are on wine or beer. I think that makes things more interesting. So there was good discussions, and then we finally have to smile on the long run. So, but I think this probably should have happened earlier. Maybe we missed it, or they missed it, either of the two. Maybe we should have had this opportunity to interact with them, but I think they probably missed that opportunity and lost it. But it's not too late, and I'm glad that some of the interactions were positive. They saw some understanding in some of the things that was shared with them. I won't go into specifics, but just a summary. To this review, I just want to get a clarification on the document that was shared now, the one that was updated by Maureen. Thank you, Maureen, for the updates. I want to be confirmed, is that the same document that Alan had in Google Docs, or what is this one about? Thank you.
Maureen, if you'd care to respond to that, please, and then we'll go to Aziz.
Thank you, Sharon. The document was actually the result of the instruction that I was given by Holly and Cheryl after discussion with the rest of the ALAC at a meeting on whatever day it was, Monday. And yeah, so this is the edited draft.
If I may, just before we go to you, Aziz, the review team and the leadership of the ALAC have felt that there was a benefit in having an editorial process go through this meeting while we had the opportunity to do face-to-face. And so in that editorial team are obviously the primary authors sitting upon my left and right-hand side of the document to date, but also fresh eyes as well. We have Olivier, I believe Glenn's invited, I mean John Laprise is invited, Sarah is doing a great job and specifically focusing on executive summary development, and Maureen, who actually is an editor, is helping us ensure that it's as readable as possible, along with Leon, who does know how to put an argument and win it in court. And we thought those things. So it's a next iteration. It's not a final iteration by any means. And if I may, Holly, that the purpose of today's exercise is to identify, is this the direction that we should be heading, and if not, why not? If there are, for example, particular slabs of information supporting documentation and material that have been cut from this current iteration for the purposes of making it, for example, a shorter document, if that was desirable. I personally think it is. Is there another way beyond the primary body of this document of making sure those things are captured and accessible to the board and the decision makers later on? So we can also discuss today, if you feel there is something missing, if you feel there is an approach that should be taken, and if you feel there is material such as you mentioned, which I would argue should not go in this report, it should be annexed to this report, let's work out what type of material, are we just hyperlinking, are we doing whatever, right? So that's what we're trying to do. You're helping us as the review team polish this into a almost finally faceted document. Your editorial team will meet on Wednesday night, Thursday morning and Friday, not sure when, but at some point, to come up with a near final proof, and that proof will come back to you all again, okay? So just as long as we're clear on the purposes of our exercise here. We have Aziz and then we have Alan, and I don't see anyone else at this stage.
Merci, Cheryl.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Two things. Well,
Because I begin by what Holly said. Tu as dit que normalement les commentaires c'est jusqu'à demain.
Well, so the comments until tomorrow morning, you said, we're going to meet with the African community and we're going to have the final comments on Wednesday evening. So please take that into account. Tijani and Sean did talk to items members, and I talked to Tom as well. And I'll tell you what I said, and I tried to convince him. In the 90s, the beginning of ISOC, a British told me a story. He used to have his dog in an ISOC mailing list, and his dog was in fact talking about the evolution of ISOC, and that dog in the ISOC mailing list had a lot of fans because he was always right. Of course, it's the master who was talking, but he had inscribed the dog on the mailing list. And I told that story to Tim regarding the empowered member who could be active, and we might have some dogs as empowered members.
And I'm delighted to know that none of the ITEMS team managed to have any time to enjoy themselves last night, because seems to me like they must have gone from one to the other of us, and I can assure you I had one of them in the bar till well after midnight as well. So poor darn people are absolutely exhausted today. But anyway, all that aside, we are well aware of when material is coming in, please. And when I said we're leaving Thursday morning, tomorrow, Wednesday, we don't meet till 8:30 p.m. So it's very much at the end of the day. So there will be plenty of time for the material to come in. Alan, and then Sean, you're back on cue.
Thank you. On an aside, following Aziz, those of us who are in attendance at WSIS 2 in Tunisia may or may not be aware of that one of the delegations had someone who was blind and had a seeing eye dog, and the dog ended up being registered as a formal member because he did need an ID card to get on the bus. I saw an early version of this, or maybe the same version, I don't know. Sorry? Okay, it doesn't matter. It's either the same or a different version. I did do a red line comparison, and from my perspective, there are a number of critical areas things that have been deleted, and I will be mentioning them as we go along. One of the concerns I have is some of the things in that report were not really aimed at the consultants, but are necessary that if the consultants don't end up changing, it's important to demonstrate that we had said these things in preparation for the next step. So again, I don't care whether they're pointed to, annexed, or something, but there are a whole bunch of things that I think are critical to the discussion that need to be somewhere in the documentary evidence. Thank you.
Alan, and what you said there is exactly what I'm hoping, and I believe Holly agrees, is the aim of today's game, is to work out where that documentary evidence goes, in what format, to make sure that we're producing the bulk of what we need now, even though there will be another version after this public comment phase. You know, that there shouldn't be a great deal of modification to what we need to prepare. We've got a good foundation to take us through, and in fact right through to the Organisational Effectiveness Committee. That's where the documentary evidence you're referring to is so important. Yes, Alan, back to you.
Just to be clear, if they make all the changes we ask for, our stuff to the OEC is going to be really easy. But we do have to cover Plan B.
I always like contingency planning. Sean.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I thank you to the guys, to the folks reviewing the document. I have to be honest. I'm not sure I'll be able to read the document in details, this current one, and I want to just ask a basic question. The document on the Google Docs, which we have been developing since 3 weeks or 1 month ago, which Alan put up, I want to confirm, was it lifted in totality? Was it lifted entirely into this and then other stuffs added to it, or has some things been removed? Because if some things have been removed, then it means that one has to read this entire document from the beginning to the end. Reading it, one can read it, but reading it to identify those things may really take much more time. So I want to confirm that before I determine if I won't be attending any meeting. I just go and hide somewhere and start reading. Thank you.
Alan will answer that.
Yeah, it was lifted from the last version that was frozen. There were a couple of small changes made after it, but not significant. There have been significant things deleted and a lot rewritten as we've gone along the way, at least from Maureen's editing, based on the version I got and created a red line. So yes, there have been deletions.
We're behind the 8 ball here on time. We know that. People, and the people who need to vote on this final version, for the want of a better word, or come to consensus on this final version to go in on time, many of you will be travelling. So we're trying to make it available as early as possible for your reading pleasure on the aeroplanes you're going to get on as well. You know, we're very aware that the deadline is bumped right up against the end of this meeting. So we'll do whatever we can to make sure that the reading of the final is easy enough, and out of today's conversation, we'll hopefully ensure that all the necessary documentary evidence has a home. What that home is, we also need to discuss and decide today, and I'd like to get beyond process and into that if possible. Sebastian, I've made sure that there's a microphone there, and so obviously I saw your waving of your name, but for anyone else in the audience, just stand there and we will recognise you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cheryl. You partly answered my question. This is the working group meeting that is doing a great job, and if you don't have the time to follow, if you're not as passionate, you need to concentrate and work once it is published, once the final version is published by the end of the week, as you said. Is there another time where we should intervene? What is the participation of the people that do not participate at such a high level? When could it be useful for us to participate and intervene?
Sebastian, Cheryl, for the record, I'd like to think that those who are the ALAC and regional leads are the highly engaged and active participants. However, anybody with the timing we have, which is compressed and unfortunate, we must remind everybody, as we did in our AP Rallo meeting this morning, Holly, that if you have significant opinion that is different from what is or needs to be expressed differently from what is in this end document by the end of the week, then you still have time and should be putting in a personal response to the public comments. I'm hoping I have time to put in my personal response to the public comments, and I'd encourage any or all of you to do the same. They're not mutually exclusive. So the train may leave the station, but there's another way to get to the destination. So, Holly, shall we get some actual documentation up and gone through? Let's go for it. Over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Let's actually, now do people have the scrolling rights for this document?
And Alberto has a small intervention. If you just go to Alberto briefly, please, Holly.
Alberto?
This is Alberto Soto speaking. I'll speak in Spanish. Just very brief. In La Crallo, we have decided that the report we send to Olivier, we'll publish it on behalf of La Crallo in the public comment as well. But there will be a heading that is actually different from what we have already sent, and there will be a few words that have been changed. That's all.
Excellent. Okay, now I think we need to go through this, I won't say line by line, but because that would kill us all and we'd make no progress. Just the time we are aiming for is an hour, let's see, it's 11:15, we are out of here at 12:45. So we don't have a lot of time. This is the opportunity, in fact, where you've all got to have reasonable level of comfort as to what's here. And as Cheryl said, if you think there are things that are missing that might go in an annex or somehow be incorporated, we need to talk about it now. We start off with, and I'm scrolling, why? Can we go up to the introduction on the screen? If people can have scroll rights on, if you're on the Adobe Connect, you've got scroll rights, and it's much easier to see on your own computer than it is on this, but it's up there for anyone. Okay, now I'm not going to read this out, but are people comfortable with this introduction? And I'm going to give you all about 3 minutes to read it if you haven't already, and see if this is a fair summary, so that if a lot of people just only read the summary, if that's all they read, are they going to get what they need to know? And I'll just give you 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 3 minutes.
Counting down to 1 and 0 by the sound of it. Cheryl Langdon, for the record, while you're doing that, let me remind you, yes, this is the introduction. Before this, there will be in its purest form, executive summary. And so, you know, we're not trying to be all things in the executive summary. So that's the following piece, the introduction, is important. Quite often people will not read much further than that. I recognise you, Olivier. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Olivier Crapin-Leblond. And besides breaking things here, I hate to hear silence, so I might as well fill it quickly. I note in the introduction that you've got a table which is actually really the executive summary. Will that move over to the executive summary at that point?
If you read the full document, it is a response to the recommendations, and that's what the table is about. There are other sections in there which are not about the recommendations, which are basically a response to what you've said, but you didn't make any recommendations about. So there are other things that would have to be covered But yes, that chart maybe belongs in the summary, along with reference to the other parts of the response that are not covered by the recommendations.
Back to you, Olivia. And I'm looking to see if there's any indication that people want to start talking. I have Javier. Oh my God, Javier. Sorry, just about died. It almost cost me my life then. Javier, please.
Thank you. Javier Rojovet for the record. Just comments on the text. First, a question, and it has to do with something that Sebastian brought right now at the board, the meeting with the board. It's in the beginning in line 25. Sorry, when it says that you know, it's talking about ALAC, and then on 28, that it would be that ALAC serves as the primary organizational home for the internet end user. So is ALAC the home? Okay, so it's at large. The other thing is in line 39. Line 39 is just a typo or an omission. It says reviews recommendation. I guess reviews recommendations to varying.
Plural on 39. Okay. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, it's the reason the numbers are on the side is for you to do exactly what you have just done. Draw our attention to anything by line. Those numbers will disappear later on. I also think we should remember that there was an important point made by Chris Despain in today's meeting as well, and that is to make sure that we look at the identification and problem statements that we can take out of the review. And so we may need to think about a clear recognition of some of those. They're woven through the document, don't get me wrong, but we might, it may be a table, it may be a paragraph, I don't know. But we need to probably make sure that is relatively high in the document. And in terms, Olivier, of the list, the table we have in the current introduction going up per se into the executive summary, I may become difficult to convince that that is a perfect idea. I think one should reference the table and, you know, but we don't, otherwise executive summaries end up as long as the documents.
Is this a subtle way into saying, I need to buy you a drink?
You can try. Alan, over to you.
Thank you. Two things. The table I find somewhat problematic because it attempts to summarize our relatively long answers in 1 or 2 words in the third column. And I find that a little bit, it may well give the wrong answer because often people don't read past that. So I would not try to summarize the long answers in a couple of words there, to be quite candid. That's number one. Number two, in the introduction that Holly originally wrote, I had submitted some changes. Some of them are small and I haven't tried to figure out if they're there or not, but there was one very substantive one. John Laprise on one of our lists asked the question, I think it was the subject of a small task or something like that, I don't remember exactly, of what would ALAC and that large look like if we simply implemented all of the changes? And I thought that was an inspired question, and I answered it on the list, and there were a number of people who basically said, that's really important, we need to include it in the group. And I won't read the whole thing here, but it comes down to saying what a number of other people have said, and let me try to find the summary of the words. If we implement all of this, which is going to imply heavily overworked people, people in tasks that they can't do, it would essentially, to be dramatic about it, destroy at large as an effective component of ICANN. And roll back all the work we've done in being able to influence direction of policy and other things within ICANN. And I think if we believe that, and as I said, I got a fair number of positive comments and no negative comments on it, then I think we need to say it. Yeah, it's a strong statement, but I think it's important.
Any more? Did
Sorry?
you have more?
No, that's it.
Okay. Tijani.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. First of all, I'd like to agree with Alan, and this should be the last part of our report, our answer, because this will conclude and show what is the harm that we can have if we implement this kind of recommendations. I raise my hand not to say that, but to agree with Cheryl about making or putting the evaluation at the beginning, at a higher position of the report, because, especially because the board, as Renalia said, decided that for the upcoming reviews, it will be split on two parts, evaluation and recommendation, and the recommendation will be done by the community. So only the evaluation will be done by the reviewer. So this is something that we have to take into account and to put it in our report so that the board, when they see that, they will see that we agree or disagree on what was the evaluation, and then for the recommendation is another issue. Thank you.
Right.
Tijani said put it at the end. I hope he meant the end of the introduction. If we put it at the end of the 20-page document, no one will ever see it.
At the end of the executive summary.
Just replying to Alan, when I did that chart, at first it was just for myself and it was shorthand. And then when I thought about a summary, I thought it would actually be useful to have something up front to actually demonstrate a lot of what is being recommended. In fact, we agree with either wholly or as in part. So the words there were almost my shorthand to myself. I think we have to decide, do we want to put the whole of the text in, which can be very long, or do we just eliminate the text altogether, which would not be which is then not confusing? I just didn't know what to do, and maybe we think about that one. But it's, it was just my shorthand to myself.
Go ahead, Alan.
I think once we finish with the text, we need to add up how many we're accepting unilaterally, partially, and rejecting, and put that summary in. But trying to describe the substance in a couple of words, I think is going to end up causing more. That's my opinion. I don't feel strongly about it, but that's the way I think.
Sion, followed by Olivier and Satish.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out who pronounced my name, so I'm trying to just, never mind. Okay, this is a show for the record. I just wanted to bring our attention to the ALAC definition thing, because I just quickly ran to the bylaw now and saw that ALAC is actually in the bylaw as the home. So I don't know, even though we understand that that is not the practice, the reality is that at large is. I think we may need to word it in a way that it's not inconsistent with what the bylaw says. So I just want to note that. Thank you.
Noted. Olivier.
Thank you, Cheryl. Olivier Crépin-Blanc speaking, and I'm looking again at the introduction and the executive summary that will be put together. I've heard earlier that you mentioned the table might not be suitable for the executive summary. So, but do we have to perhaps focus and see whether we would have it on there or not? I do notice that the introduction at the moment doesn't read like an introduction. It reads more like an executive summary. And I would have thought that an introduction would probably just say what is in this paper. And I note that I wasn't aware when reading this overall that it had so many different component parts. And I can see here the different sections: recommendations made through a mission, recommendations made through a mission, EMM implementation guidelines, methodology, non-recommendation suggestions, analysis of prior review recommendations, travel issues, and volunteer turnover. That's a very complete statement. And so the introduction might wish to just say a few words about what's in, where one would find what in there, rather than digging into the issues. And of course, the executive summary would have the issues itself.
trust your editorial team, but Holly wishes to defend the position regardless. Go on, Holly.
I was just about to say I am not about to defend the whole thing. I was about to say we have 1 hour, and I suggest instead of trying to wordsmith, I want people to go through and see if there's something of substance that troubles you. Wordsmithing has been done very well by Maureen, and she's going to have lots of help. There's plenty of wordsmithing, and after everything's wordsmithed, your plane ride home better be very long, because you're going to be, if you have anything really objectionable, object. But can we please move on to the text?
It's my job to threaten people, Holly. Don't get into my space. Okay. You look after your reputation. Don't try and match. Don't try and match my nasty one. Satish, go ahead.
Thank you, Cheryl. Satish Babu for the record. First of all, I agree with the that we should not be wordsmithing this document right now. The priority should be for the larger issues. Secondly, I'd like to point out that if we go on the track of what would happen if we implemented these recommendations, we would not only break at large, but we will also break parts of ICANN. In particular, some of the policy processes today are not scalable. If you have 5,000 people coming and supporting, giving public comments, the public comment process is not being managed by an algorithm which is going to simply kind of do the data processing. It is individuals who have to go through every one of them. It's going to break the whole ICANN processes as well, not only within ALAC. Thank you.
And there's someone like Alan and others around the table who sits on the parts of the working group that do that laborious role. I hear what you're saying and couldn't agree more. Just before we move on, and I would like to see some more cards or hands up because we do want to look at substance now, let's agree, if you would, on the following. Obviously, there's going to be an I that needs dotting or a T that needs crossing or a pluralisation or a misword that needs picking up. Can any and all of those things just be put to an email? And as far as I'm concerned, I don't care whether it goes to the leadership team list, that'll do, or just, you know, get it to staff and they'll get it to us. But I think we just need a single point of collecting all of those. Line 44 should be this and line 177 should be that. And as long as we have it in our possession, before 20:15 tomorrow UTC, so what's that? That's, well, 8:15 in the evening tomorrow. Then I'm sure that the editorial team will be able to bring those in. And yes, you will then have another opportunity to polish up again. But please note those privately, get them to us. Now let's go, preferably by section and line number, to matters of substance. I think, Carly, you got your hand up before Sean, and regardless, Sean, you've had a couple of interventions, so if you don't mind, I'll go to Carly.
Thank you, Sharon. Because I'm not sure if my comments would fit into the lines, but it's more in general. But anyway, I think, well, just then we had a very good meeting with the board, and there are two top of the line issues that we are concerned about. One is about the review, obviously. Second is about the effectiveness of our at-large ALAC and ALSs. Okay, one thing is that we just mentioned about the bylaws. I sort of believe that the bylaws does not did not focus on what should be focused. Well, because we are here to represent the end user's interests, okay? So therefore, our grassroots organizations, ALSs, there should be a criteria. That is, they do the same. They represent the end user's interests and defend them, or represent, to demonstrate that. That should be the fundamental criteria for admitting an and ALS. And that will form the foundation for the RALOs as well as ALAC as well. So that is one thing that probably need to be revised in the bylaws. I don't know if this should be mentioned in our response or not, but that's one thing I see. Another thing is that I just in the meeting, I was about to come up with a counter question. We are being asked that whom do we represent? Okay, we say we represent the end user's interests. Okay, my question is, whom does ICANN represent? During my work at CCTRT, I sort of talked about ICANN should play the role as a regulator, and was not that very well received, I will say. Okay. However, one thing that I see that especially after the independence from the US government of ICANN seemed to be overlooked. Because before, as ICANN was overseen by the US government, the US government, no question, is supposed to represent the public interest as an elected government. Okay. However, then in that sense, ICANN can focus on the DNS registrar, do its own work, because that part of responsibility was taken care of by the overseer. Now, we're independent. So we see a lot of work that we carry on. For example, price caps. For example, all the approval procedures of the new GTLDs, etc., etc., etc. Those are all typically of a regulator, what it does. Then this regulator is to represent the public interest, or in other words, the end user's interests, which is defined as ALAC's responsibility. So that brings a conflict. From his historical inheritance, ICANN, as I see it, is backboned by registrars. Should that continue to be the case? Okay, if ICANN is positioned to be a regulator, foremost, in that sense, the DNS industry, the business interests of the DNS industry should be the target of regulation, not to be within the decision-making process of regulations. And then that would obviously will turn the whole thing upside down within ICANN. So this, well, I'm just going through the simple logic. However, will that carry on and how it will move forward, I don't know. But I'm just raising a question that how do we at ALAC see this issue? Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. I don't want to use the words "it's out of scope" because it's not for us, but it is for what we're doing in this meeting. I think it's a very useful conversation to have, but I'm going to be avoiding it in this particular fora.
Fully understood.
Thank you. We've got what have we got? 45 minutes left in the session today, and let's see if we can be as focused as possible on substantive issues out of this piece of work. So, Holly, did your hand go up before Sean? Or no. No. Okay. So Sean, and then not Holly, not at all. Over to you.
Yeah, just a quick one, Sean, for the record. Is there a reason why we're not using Google Docs as an other option?
Sean, I had people in each here then. Would you please repeat that, please? Because I would like to hear what you were saying.
Okay, this is Sean for the record. I was asking, is there any reason why we are not using Google Docs as an option to edit, to contribute edits to the documents?
Cheryl, for the record, it in fact was started out, a lot of the work was started out in Google Docs. There is no problem with doing that. However, we are getting to the point where we should be locking things off, not opening them up for general commentary and edit. We also need to recognise that as the owner of the current Google Doc, unless Alan invites specific people as contributors, you know, that hasn't happened as yet. Can do, probably, but do we need to? I'm not sure. But there's no reason that we do or don't use Google Docs. But remember, we can't just use Google Docs because not everyone can utilise that particular tool. Alan?
Just to be clear, the current Google Doc is at this point obsolete. So making comments there will not be particularly useful. If we choose, this Word document could be re-imported into Google Docs and use that for the next 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
That's not my call, but it certainly could be done. And once we do that, we will clearly open it up to whoever we should open it up to. The current one is not the relevant one.
And if I may, Alan, Cheryl, for the record, Sean, I'd also, you know, Holly was having apoplecsia just with the concept of putting the current editorial documentation out for more general note here, comment there. And I can understand that position. There are plenty of ways for people to contribute, but let's try and get most of those contributions to us by whatever means possible before 8:15 tomorrow evening. And then certainly with the polishing, we can you know, do a locked off document, say this is the version that is now going to be put into Google Docs and Word, if that's what you all want us to do. And then your last polish could be done by that. But again, time is against you. I don't know whether each of you have the time to do that with a Google Doc on 28 pages going on.
To cut it short, after this meeting, I will take this Word document and do a compare to the base that it was started on and distribute that red line or the quasi-red line to everyone so they can see the changes and perhaps focus their attention on those things rather than trying to read the whole document over from scratch.
Which, Cheryl, for the record, of course, goes back to your earlier point. Now, I'm not seeing any more cards up, and I would like to think I should see more cards up. I had both Alan and Tajani, one in each ear, saying, do you want to start the timer? Well, at the moment, yes, I can, but then that'll be good because we'll be finished by 12:10, not 12:45, because I'm not seeing input here.
And all I can say is this is fantastic because it means that actually we've now got Maureen's document. Everybody's happy with it. Nobody's got any problems with it. And so you can all walk away and we just take it in from there. And if I'm wrong, then your cards should be up. And if I'm right, we can finish the meeting.
Okay. I thought we were going to go recommendation by recommendation.
It's exactly what she said.
I haven't heard the first one being called.
Well, that's because everybody keeps intervening.
That is exactly what Holly said we would do. So, the cards went up and then the cards went down, right? Holly, put up the first recommendation if that's what you were doing.
This is what I was trying to do, and we just get a little bit kind of, okay.
Page reference for staff to scroll to, please.
Okay, let me first of all find it in my document.
Line 85.
Thank you. Line 85.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's line 85. My Adobe Connector's crashed at the moment, so...
Oh, you can look at mine.
85, you need to scroll the other direction for the screen.
Right,
There
okay. We are now at recommendation 1. It is simply, and I'll read the recommendation, I'll let you read the response, and if you're happy with the response, because I actually recognise a lot of it anyway as earlier versions. At-large members from each region should be encouraged and, where possible, funded to participate in internet governance policy-related conferences, events in their region and to use these events as opportunities proactively to raise awareness among end users about the at-large and the opportunities to engage in ICANN-related activities. Now, can I make one comment about this? This is not controversial. The response is, that's fantastic. We do it anyway. Nice you should say so, because there have been barriers put in place in terms of either funding or with a misunderstanding of our role to do this. To me, this is a very welcome statement. We not only agree, we do it. And I'm not, I don't, if anybody has anything to add, then put your hand up. In some way indicate you want to think, otherwise we can just move right on to recommendation 2.
If we just note that Alan had his hand up to begin with, over to you, Alan. It may not be anti what you've said, but let's hear what you want.
Thank you. Thank you very much for letting me say what I want.
I would like to show it.
I think we have fallen in this answer, we have fallen into the morass of the review team and are being far too prescriptive and far too much detail. The reference to a delegation of 2 or 3 RAILO leaders are effective, which I think is one RAILO specific, but is not a level I don't think we need to go in. That goes into a bit too much detail on the 5, crop 5 only has 5 slots. I think very much we need to say we don't have enough funding to do this properly and not go into the details. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I trust that's noted and nobody has a counterpoint to that. My screen is still black in front of me. Can I have the next line reference for the next recommendation, please, Holly?
108, I'll read it. Recommendation 2. At large should be more judicious in selecting the amount of advice it seeks to offer, focusing upon quality rather than quantity. And our response, in summary, we support this recommendation as well. There is a chart that Alan has done which actually demonstrates the fact that over time we have been judicious in what we choose to respond to. If people can read the response and indicate whether they are happy with that response, we can move right along. I'll give you a bit of time. Alan, you want to say something about the recommendation?
If I may then, while you're all reading, Glenn, I note you're having to leave to do your ubiquitous duty of photography, but you did have a point in the chat earlier. Did you wish to speak to that before you left?
No, it was basically the sidebar in the document itself. So what I understand that you're looking for emails. So each section I'm doing comments on each recommendation. So which email address do you want me to send it to?
Can I ask, can we actually ask one of the staff just to receive this to stop the mania? Whom? Heidi? Just send it to staff the at-large staff. One of them will work it out. And can I suggest we have a subject line that just says at-large review, and then we'll all know.
At-large review comments.
You can make as many letters as you want, as long as the first of them spell out at-large review. Alan, go ahead.
Thank you. There in the editing in this one, there were 2 things lost that one is important, and the other one, if we want to take it out, the chart needs to be changed. This is a chart of the number of things that we submitted something on, a comment on. Some percentage of those were very, you did a good job, thanks for doing all that work, which were not substantive, did not take much amount of time, we just felt it was socially proper. I didn't want to have me or staff take the time to read through all of those, so there was a statement pointing out that some of these were non-substantive. If we want to omit that statement, then we need to go back and actually count how many substantive ones. Therefore, my preference is to, because it lowers the numbers and they're pushing for lower numbers. Okay, so either way, either staff has to go through and do the substantive review or we add back the statement. The second one is a comment that a very small fraction of these are actually advice to the board. We've given 2 or 3 in the last 2 years. And I believe, again, since they are very confused on what we do and think we only do advice to the board, I think it is really crucial to point out that this is how many statements we made, not the number of advice to the board, and we need to emphasize that. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. I've been noting down. Have you been noting as well, Maureen? Okay, 2 people have noted that.
Also in comments I had sent to you and Maureen.
That's all right. Okay, recommendation.
Before you move on, you have Alberto.
Oh.
If you'd like to, let me help you do the cue.
Yes.
Just leave the mic open. Leave the mic open, leave it in front of you. I can project to get to it. Don't worry. Alberto.
This is Alberto Soto for the records. I believe that items didn't tell us what the metrics were to make a difference between the important things, the substantial things, the short-term or long-term. So I believe that this response is correct because we have no metrics. I mean, otherwise we should be making them up. So perhaps we can leave the numbers and that's it.
Excellent point. Thank you very much. I've made a note of that. Okay, we're on recommendation 3. Line number 124. We might even get there. At-large should encourage greater direct participation by at-large members, ALMs, in ICANN working groups by adopting our proposed empowered membership model. Now, to my mind, this is really the critical response. This is where I think that the Australian term is the rubber hits the road. We won't go any further than that, except to say, and now would everybody please read this? I'll give you a minute or 2, because this is the critical bit. This is the one recommendation, one of the very few recommendations where, in fact, we have real problems. Now, Sebastian already has his hand up. Do you want to come to the mic, please?
Yes, thank you. For the ease of the meeting, I will do it in English, if you accept that I do it in English.
Oh, no, do it in French.
Okay, thank you. It's bring me to 2 questions. The first one is that, if I understood well, there is 2 documents we will go out. This one is for ILAC purposes, and the other is for RALO purposes. Therefore, I am not sure that we need to dig into detail about the RALO level in this answer. But that means also that you may need, at the beginning of the document, to acknowledge that there will be 2 documents, that we are just digging into one part because the other part is taken care of by the one concerned, that the RALO leaders. And my other suggestion, and sorry to be late at the beginning, when you start by ILAC, first write ILAC in full, and second, put a definition of ILAC at the beginning of this document. We saw today that even the people who must know have some trouble between ILAC and at large, then we need to say it again and again. And but I think that, and then my third point, it's here, we may want to take the recommendation and split it in 2 parts. The one who say participating by at large, whatever member, a participant, that's one, and that's, we can say, yes, we are doing it, we can improve it, we want to do it. And the second part, it's about their model, but their model is just one recommendation, and we don't, I would say we don't care about this recommendation because we disagree or whatever, but there are 2 points in this recommendation. Unfortunately, it's done in 1 sentence, but we may wish to split this recommendation in 2 parts. Thank you.
All very good points. Thank you. I think it's a very good right up front in the intro to say to differentiate between at-large community, at-large, spell them out. So yes, of course. I think it makes a fair point. Certainly in the response that is there, we do distinguish between participation and rejecting the model. So we sort of say, well, yeah, we do, but don't follow the model. And you weren't here at the beginning, Sebastian, but what we did say is we'll be working with Olivier. They're developing a Rollo response, and when that's ready, what we will be doing is actually sitting down and looking at both documents. So it depends very much on what the Rollos are going to say, and when we have a chance to look at that, that we come back here and say, do we need to say everything? I mean, we have to say something because this is an ALAC response, but we may not have to say a lot if the Rollo response says it. So I think that's a point we just have to take on board. Thank you.
Also, Sebastian, we need to recognise that there is a style guide that was created by ICANN, and I'd like to encourage us to follow that style guide, which actually does do things like when you should have things fully spelled out to begin with. So I think we'll also use that as part of our polishing repertoire, but thank you for reminding us. The other thing we may consider, of course, is the use of a glossary, which means that when we refer to a document, to a word in a document, there is a definition appended to the document that makes it clear what we mean by it. I have Tijani, and then I have Satish. Tijani, and then Alan. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Tijani speaking. I don't think it is interesting to give as much detail about the individual members in our current organization. I think that it is good to say that it is already implemented in 3 RALOs. It is on its way for the 2 other RALOs. And we can say also each RALO is implementing it according to their rule of procedure, to say that they are not all the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I, Maureen, you're fresh on the list, or is that a right to reply? On the list, thank you, noted. Okay, next we have Satish, and then we have Alan, and then we'll be going to Maureen.
Thank you, Cheryl. Satish, for the record. I would support what Tijani has said. On line 131, there is a statement that says IPRELO organizes its individual members into a regional ALS. That process is not fully done, so I'd rather kind of take it out.
Noted. Alan.
Thank you. I've got quite a number of things because there were a lot of changes made on this. The very first one is a small point, but it says, in fact, two current ALAC members are individual and affiliated members. I think that's rather moot. Traditionally, almost all NOMCOM appointees have not belonged to an ALS to start with, and I think that's more of a focus. I mean, I happen to be an unusual creature that right now I'm a RALO appointed person who's an individual member, but you know, that's a detail that happens to be true today. The second one is there was a question raised, and I don't know exactly where it fits in the current one, of pointing out that they give no explanation why with the empowered model, suddenly more people will show up. The lack of connection between, you know, why will they suddenly come? And I think that needs to be asked. The third is there is a reference to the, if someone can find it, the ALAC sees potential for objective of enhanced particular users participation through further investment by ICANN. I really don't think we want to be asking for more money in this context. So the reference to investment, we need more investment if we're going to succeed, I think is a losing argument. Sorry. Yeah, there's again, that end of the section, there's a section that mentions next gen and the fellowship as important. As it reads right now, it reads as if that is our only source of new people. And that's, you know, they're a source of really good people, but it's not the only source. And it reads as if, you know, that's the only place we get people from. And I think that needs to be more generalized. Yes, those functions are important, those paths are important, but they're not unique. And almost lastly, there's a paragraph that reads, the ALAC believes the ALS membership should remain because it is an at-large link to the grassroots. In the local context, ALSs are recognized as established organizations, and in some cases older than ICANN, blah, 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 so on. That completely ignores the initiative that we're now starting, that ALSs, we hope, by reaching out to the members, will be a source of people who will actually be active. So it's not only the work they do on the ground, it's the fact that they are a targeted source of people we can communicate with and hopefully get some of them involved. So again, I think that's an important issue we want to make, because it meshes with our solution to what they're addressing. Sorry, I didn't realize this was the format we're going to be working on, so it's a little harder for me. Yeah, there's a reference to RALOs being consensus-driven, and some of our RALOs are very consensus-driven. Some of them are very vote-driven. So we can't, you know, this fits very well for AP RALO, which very rarely votes. It doesn't fit as well for the current incarnation of NARALO or LAC-RALO, which virtually always votes. So it needs to be made sure it's not RALO specific. And I believe, lastly, there is a reference that quote, does not guarantee that we represent 4.5 billion end users. The number, I think, is currently 3.5, and we never claim to represent it. So it shouldn't say that in this section. Thank you.
Maureen.
Now, by the way, all of these were already sent, so you have documented.
And you're also on the editing team. Maureen.
Thank you. No, I've taken on board the references about the RALOs. Now, when I was putting this together, of course, Olivier's first version of the RALO responses came through, and there was some really interesting stuff in there which I felt should be incorporated in, because it actually talked about the membership model. But I take on board that there are some instances where being too specific isn't relevant, and we can actually remove that sort of thing. But I think that when we're talking about the membership model itself, that there should be some sort of some sort of comparison should still be included in there, probably on a lesser scale. Thank you.
Okay, we've got the speaking list as it is at the moment. I have Alberto and then Tijani, but Annette, and let me recognise one of our former chairs of the ALAC. Great to have you back in the room. Did you wish to speak to this matter, or are you just trying to get a better vision on the screen? Okay, so on the next recommendation, I've got you lined up. You'll be first cab off the rank, I promise. Briefly, and now staff, please run the 2-minute timer. Alberto.
Alberto Soto.
This is Alberto Soto. Thank you for being the only one with the 2-minute clock. I think items really didn't read our bylaws, especially the LACRALO bylaws. Individual users in LACRALO are considered, are included, and they have no right to a voice, but the right to vote. And they have actually worked internally in working groups. And within that working group, they do have a right to vote, because this is the opinion that they are taking. Now, with respect to the experience, I asked yesterday that the experience in this model, well, the answer that we got from items is it's the same experience that the community, the empowered community, is having. They have adopted I mean, the community has adopted this, so there is no model with experience. And finally, next gen, as a source, remember that the meeting in our region was suspended, and we didn't get any next gen for several years, actually. So next gen is only for the region as opposed to the fellowship program. Thank you.
Thank you, Tijani, and he gets a 2-minute clock too. It's all right.
Okay, thank you. Tijani speaking. I think that the lack of connection between the evaluation and the recommendation should be highlighted in the executive summary as a general remark. And then each time we find it in any recommendation, we have to highlight it also. Second remark, I have been advised to avoid the periphery of at large, because it seems that in English it is not a good utilization of the word. Since I am not a good English speaker, I give you the information, and if you find it like this, yes, please change it.
Thank you. Maureen, I'm assuming your card is back down and you're not back in the queue. Okay, then I'll go back to Sean.
Yeah, this is shown for the record. The recommendation 3 is somewhat the only place where perhaps AMM is being proposed. So I have a concern with us adding any form of support on that recommendation, especially on the table which says partly. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I think recommendation 3 was clearly talking about EMM, and I think we should just be against it straight up as much as possible. I don't think we need to assume that they were referring to individual membership, even though that's what they're doing. But I think they are proposing EMM in recommendation 3. Thank you.
Can I respond to that? If you go back to Sebastian's recommendation that we split a question, in this case, we can actually deal with this separately. We can deal with the actual recommendation about individual membership and then say, however, talking about this in the context of EMM, we think X, and just make that a little bit clearer.
Javier.
Quickly, Javier Ruajawet for the record. I don't remember if anywhere in the response we say, or if we should say, how far we are at the RALO level in regards how far we are in accepting the individual members. Most RALOs accept them, and some are about to accept it. That's what I've gathered. Some are pretty close. So, just to like a little one-line timeline saying, we're there, and we have decided this, and it's in the process of being implemented in 2 RALOs. Thank you.
Okay, we'll discuss that further. We need to move on to recommendation 4 now. That, I believe, if my eyes don't deceive me, whoa, don't take it away, was line 172, which has just gone off screen.
Shall I read it anyway for you?
I think you may as well, Holly.
Recommendation 4, at large support staff should be more actively involved in ALM engagement in policy work for the ALAC drafting position papers and other related work. My first response to that, before anybody says anything else, is that seems to be about 3 things rolled up in one. It talks about ALM engagement. Well, if you take that component out, it's about ALF support staff actively involved in drafting papers and other policy work. And I think we have to say, take that separately from the membership model and deal with that separately. Okay?
And I welcome Annette to the table. Over to you, Annette.
Well, Annette Mühlberg for the record. It's a great pleasure to be here this time because it's actually the 10th anniversary of the RALOs, and we put a lot of work in 2006 and 2007 to make this possible. So we actually drafted bylaws in 2006 and made RAILO's run and reel in 2007. So it is a funny thing to be at a review team meeting right now, and I don't want to, molest you with old experiences, but there is one thing we asked for 10 years ago, and I think it's still crucial. What RAILOs and ALSs and ALAC need. We always have this issue of language and translation. We always get the answer, it's too expensive. What we can do and could do is get a little help of, we have some criteria at ALAC and also at the regional level, what is really of interest to us. And then we want to write a little paper. And this little paper, normally first, we don't have the time, we don't have the language to really do it right and properly in English. And we need some experts. We ask for what we want to have written, what is the position about, but we need an expert who has some knowledge about the ICANN world and the IT world and the technical world and so on. And this person who is able to write, this person we should be able to pay in a very transparent way with a very small budget. And I think this makes sense. And we did that approach. We started that in 2006 and 2007, and suddenly it got lost. Instead of that, we got more and more staff we didn't ask for. As a trade unionist, I'm always for staff and not against staff, for the record. But staff is really expensive. To have just a little budget of 6,000 euros a year for the possibility to really write a paper which really reflects your positions and not ICANN policy position written by staff, I think that is crucial to really understand what people want. So if you really want to have the advice of end users in the end to the board, I think this would be helpful. In short, less staff and a very small, very transparent budget. And I think apart from that, that staff helps in drafting these is very good. So this is not against staff, it is just the proportion of where you put the money and just give a little authority to the local and to the ALAC to really write down their position in the way they want to. Thanks.
Thanks. I will take over the microphone to say, in fact, if you were watching the meeting with the board and ALAC, some of the things were put to the CEO, and he just said, put this in your budget item.
The other thing is, and these days, and in fact, from about 2011-ish, certainly, arguably even 2009-ish, but 11 definitely, we have become now, I would suggest, one of the largest users of ICANN's language services. So we actually do have a lot of ability to get local language things changed into English language if that's needed. However, these enablers are going to be more important if a EMM happened to be the case. So thank you for your intervention. Holly's made notes on that. Humberto.
Yes, sorry. I was thinking, I'm going to speak in Spanish, perdón. Lo que pasa.
The thing is, and it doesn't really have any connection with this point, but I want to clarify something that Alberto said, because it is important in terms of how it will be drafted in the document. In the case of LACRALO, nowhere do the bylaws consecrate individual members. However, because there is silence, we have interpreted that they can be involved with no right to vote. And so in the mediation process that we are conducting right now, the proposal that we have is that it should be expressly stated within the reform that we think we should do. That's the situation. Thank you.
Yeah, but is there a reason we cannot move to recommendation 5 now? No, go ahead then, Holly.
Recommendation 5, at large should redouble efforts to contribute to meetings between ICANN staff, senior staff and executives, ISOC and other international organizations to engage in joint strategic planning for cooperative outreach. I find that a wonderful suggestion. We're never invited. And I think that's what Alan said. Please have a 1-minute read. And if you're unhappy, put your hand up. If you're not unhappy, okay, Alan, go ahead.
Go for it, Alan. Okay. Holly's just said a minute. We don't have a minute to spare, Holly. Right. We just need to move on. So, Alan, with a 2-minute clock, and I don't care whether you have an alarm, I just care that we have a 2-minute clock, and then Vanda, and then Javier.
Thank you very much. 2 small points, or I hope small points. First is there is a reference to a number of AP STAR and then some AP acronyms. If we're going to use acronyms, we really have to define them, not presume people know what they are. And I would prefer to not have RAILO-specific stuff in this kind of section. Simply say, many RAILOs do things. I don't think we need to list each of the MOUs that we have. And the second one is, there was, if we are going to have anything specific, I suggest we reinstate or rewrite a paragraph at the end which summarizes that we have a great interest in joint activities and we think it's a great thing, and you know, cooperation and funding and whatever notwithstanding, we agree.
Okay, I actually have Heidi next, then Vanda, then Humberto, then Maureen.
Thank you, Cheryl. This is Heidi. Just to let, we could add that at-large staff are already in touch with our counterparts in ISOC, and I think we could probably increase that. So I think this is probably already in progress.
Vanda.
Yes, just a short one. Is remember that since they mentioned the strategic plan, that RALOs and groups like RALO, AFRALO, they have strategic plans, and the plans has good results. So little mention maybe help.
Thank you, Vanda. Humberto? Javier, what is my problem with you today, my dear man? I do apologize. Javier.
Javier Ruajovet, for the record, as we say in Spanish, no pido vuelta, you translate it. I'm fine to be after Alberto. Line 183, just for clarification purposes, the way it's drafted, it says ISOC and then in parentheses other international organizations. Just for clarity, maybe we should clarify. Pardon the that ISOC is not an international organization per se in the sense of IGO. So maybe it's ISOC and international, so it's not an other.
That's their bad language, not ours.
Oh, that's right. My bad.
But thank you. We all agree that that's...
So let's correct them.
we couldn't possibly do that. I have Maureen and then I have Sebastian.
Thanks, Cheryl. Maureen for the record. In this particular instance, I think that the issue is that at RALO level, for example, or even ALAC level, that we're not being invited to the formal meetings that ICANN has. And I think in this particular instance, what I was actually trying to say is that although it isn't happening at the high level, at the grassroots level, RALOs are actually getting out there and making their own contacts. And I think it's in that context that I've actually included and made sure that, it's noted that it's actually at the grassroots that people are actually making those valuable contacts. And as you say, it's part of our strategic outreach, strategic plans that each of the RALOs has to actually get out there and do the outreach.
Thank you. We'll work more on that then. Sebastian, then Olivier, and I assume, oh, you do want to have another. Is it, please? Okay,
Thank you.
After Sebastian, it goes to you, then Olivier.
I want to be sure that it's clear what it is in this sentence. What it's important here, it's not international, is I star. And I star, it's a short list of organization. It's the root server system, it's IETF, it's W3C, it's ISOC, Internet Society, sorry. It is RRRs and NRO, and that's it. Full stop. Yes, I don't like the name international. We are not international organization. Neither of them are international organization. It's a bad writing, but what it's important, it's I star. And I would say that if we are willing to start to have discussion with ISOC, then we will unbalance at large and the role of ILAC in this. ISOC is just one part of the ILSs. And if we give more power, more role, and I am an ISOC member, then it's with this hat that I talk to. Also, I don't think it's a fair statement. At the level of the RALOs, there is a lot of things going on with the ARRs. We may wish to have something with W3C, with ATF, but what is important is that it's done at the right level. I am not sure that we're at the right level. And if we want to compete with the board of ICANN to meet with the board of ISOC, we will lose our time and and it's not useful, I guess. Thank you.
So noted, Sebastian. Thank you very much. You had a tiny intervention. Please go ahead.
Javier Rojas, for the record, no, Sebastian clarified for me that there's a meaning to I-star. So if it's a term of art, it's a term of art.
It is. Olivier and then Alan.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Olivier Capano-Blanc speaking. You might have all forgotten this, but in 2014, there was a meeting of the director for at-large, the ALAC chair at the time, me effectively, and the director of chapters for ISOC. And we derived 9 action points from that. It has to be somewhere in our wikis because it was published. Heidi is pointing to where it is. Okay, we've got the 9 action points. So first, webinar, introduction to at-large and ISOC. This would include speakers from at-large and ISOC and ELS chapters. There's a whole number of other things. I'll put them in the chat so you can read them. I'm not going to read through all the whole lot. But we haven't followed up on this. So in a way, the ball is rolling, but it's not being controlled.
So what we will do, what we will note to do is to reference that material as part of the documentary support evidence. I've got Alan, and then I go back to Annette, and then we need to move to our next recommendation.
Thank you. As noted in the ALAC response, the not approved by ALAC, but not disputed by ALAC, response to the SOAC accountability subteam of the workstream, accountability workstream 2. The ALAC is not particularly subject to capture because people are appointed from around the world. Our one single vulnerability, however, is the large number of ISOC chapters. Should ISOC ever be in a position to control those chapters, or for that matter, should the chapters actually start talking to each other and working together, we have a very significant capture problem. And pushing that we should work closer with ISOC and get more cooperation and coordination with ISOC is almost saying, let's see if we can figure out a good capture scenario for the ALAC. I'd be very, very cautious about this.
Thank you, Alan. And as one of the co-rapporteurs for that particular work track within Workstream 2, I just want to remind you the mandate for Workstream 2, looking at the accountability for the support organisations and advisory committee, the best practice modelling we were asked to come up with was specifically to be looked at through the lens of minimising the risk of capture. Annette.
Thank you to Sebastian and to Alan for clarifying the role of ISOC for the records and history, because of the fact that ISOC is financed largely by business. In Europe, we put in our regional bylaws in the beginning, we stopped that for certain reasons, but in the beginning, we did not have ISOCs join the RALO because of that there was a conflict of interest there. So to push that, I think is a mistake. We now have many ISOC as ALSs, but I think for clarification and transparency and understanding, it's good to publish, to really write what Sebastian had said so that everyone understands what this I star means. And in the answer that we should add that these are certainly important organizations, but not the only important organizations. And that especially on the regional level, there are other organizations and other meetings which are at least as important. So to really clarify that this is not, this is like an incest activity arrangement, and it's the opposite of outreach and regional activities. So I think we should clarify that. Thank you.
And as Alan said, it's like a recipe for capture, but apart from anything else, there's lots of opportunity for capture coming out of this report. That's just one of them. Can I draw us to a close on this recommendation and move to the next? And may I tell you that as the timing is writ, we only have 3 more minutes. So it appears to me that we are not going to get through all of these recommendations. However, the next one is one that deserves a face-to-face interaction. So if I may stretch our friendship with the fabulous interpretation team and take no more than 5 to 10 minutes on this next recommendation, and then encourage, as we said earlier, for you to go through and give us feedback on the rest, which I think in many cases we actually agree with. That's the way forward. Does anybody object to that? Alan, don't object to it, please. Oh, thank heavens. Good. Okay. She's poised. Okay. Over to you, Holly, for the next rec.
Actually, there are 2. One is recommendation of, this is 6, selection on the seat 15 of the ICANN board. Now, I can't imagine that anybody thinks that we should not have a process and we should actually make the final recommendation by ourselves. Is there anybody who thinks that, because that's what we're saying. We're at 6, okay? The other one that is contentious is the abolition of our working groups. Those are the 2 that I can see are going to cause the most heartache, and we'd like to hear from everybody in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Beyond that, I'm just going to have a quick skim, but I think those are the 2 biggies.
Okay, over to you, Alan, and then we have Harold. Okay, there's a point of it's a point of order, I believe, from Sebastian. Go ahead.
Yes, I really feel that this part of the discussion may be held, even if the election is over, without the candidate on this. You need to leave the other to talk about that. And it's a reason why if it's the last 10 minutes, I will leave the room. I hope that I am sure that the other will give a good statement. And I think I would like to urge all the candidates, all the people who put their name, not just the 2 who is on the slide, to not discuss this issue. That's it. Thank you.
So noted, Sebastian. Is it the will of the room that we declare this to be conflicted territory? If anyone believes that it is conflicted territory, and that anybody, I suppose, who's put themselves forward in the recent election and selection process should not be engaged in the conversation. Make yourselves known if you believe that is the case. You believe it is conflicted territory. Go ahead, please, Leon.
Thank you, Cheryl. I do believe that it would be healthier to not be in the room discussing this so that everyone else can discuss it very openly. But my remark was not going to be about this process, but about the working groups. Just a quick note, if I may disrupt a little bit this point, I spoke to one of the reviewers, and he told me that we misunderstood what was written in the report. So I kindly asked him to fine-tune the recommendations so that we don't misunderstood what's written there. And his point was to say, okay, so you have been reviewing whether you disband or resume the different working groups that you have on your roster. And so far, you have been refusing to actually disband many working groups that have been in pause for many time. So, okay, I told him, so just let us, tell us that. Don't tell us to not have working groups. Tell us to refresh, in any case, the working groups that we have, and we can then continue the discussion. So that's my point.
Thank you, Leon. And indeed, that's a point that was made to me by the reviewers as well, that the suggestion was, I have your point of order, the suggestion was, in fact, to take a clean slate and a new look at what working groups we do need. And I would believe that it will be rewritten regardless of our response in that light. Your point of order, Tijani, because then I do.
Thank you very much. Yes, I didn't want to raise my name because I don't think it is a conflict of interest or not. I want to say to Sebastian and Leon that we are not discussing the current process. It is about having our own process or make the NUMCOM and the random draw do it in our place. So where is the conflict? Where? I don't see.
If I may just follow up, I agree with you, Tijani. I don't think that there's any conflict since the process is now over. However, I think that having at least myself in this room could maybe refrain someone to openly speak and to feel comfortable about discussing the issue. That's why I want to provide everyone with the most open forum to actually discuss this.
Thank you very much, Leon. And I want to note that that means 2 of the 3 people who put expressions of interest in for this are leaving the room. And I'm now going to go to you, Alan.
Number one, I agree with Tijani. I do not believe there is any conflict because we're talking about how a future process might be done where we may be candidates in again or not. But that notwithstanding, the comment I am going to make is completely irrelevant to that whole discussion. So I do not plan to leave. I do plan to stay. And if that restrains someone else from saying something, you know, I'll leave for when you want to say it. I'll block my ears, but I don't plan to leave for the discussion.
All right, well, this is known in Australia as a dog's breakfast. Harold, over to you.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm going to speak Spanish. Muy breve.
Very briefly, let me just say that this recommendation has a conceptual contradiction, because it recognizes that as a community at large has skills in the bottom-up model to make policies, to make proposals, to make corrections, to make reviews, but we do not really have a capacity to vote. So conceptually, what are we saying then? Basically, this is what it is. Are they removing our possibility to vote? Is that what they're doing? Just that. Thank you.
Okay. Alan, specific to this recommendation, please make your comments.
Thank you. There was a comment that was at the end that was omitted, and I believe it is critical. As Tim McGuinness made very clear in his talk, and the paper makes slightly less clear, this is an attempt to roll back the change in 2002 enacted by the board to change how at-large votes, as it were. I do not believe it is within the scope of a review of at-large to attempt to even partially roll back a board decision at that time. You know, maybe one day we should have voting of everyone and their dog for the director or whatever, but it's not within scope of this review to undo a board action, and a very, very strong board action, and I believe we need to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. This is one of those that I doubt will have any wings or support beyond the writers of the paper. Sean, and then Alberto.
Yeah, this is shown for the record. So I want to agree with the fact that I also don't see any conflict of interest in this whole thing. And I'm even surprised that it's been said. Anyway, on the recommendation itself, I find it interesting. We were here talking about possibility of implementing one part of the previous review, which recommended 2 seats for the board. Last year we were talking about it to the board, and I remember Chris Despain was even saying, why not? Why was it not added in the first place? And now we're getting a review that is even saying, okay, this time around, just that single seat you have, let's take it from you and give NOPCOM to do the selection. It's just interesting, and it also loses the fact that there is a community and there is the NOMCOM side of things. If we're going to have this, then we should just have NOMCOM do all the board selections across all the RALOs, I mean, all the SOs and ACs. Then that would make things even up. In my own opinion, we should at least properly, and we have appropriately responded to this, and I think this is sufficient. I don't even know why we need to respond in these details. However, I hope that will be enough to educate them on how much process we go through before we even elect that single board member, to see how transparent it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Alberto.
This is Alberto Soto. Right now, I agree with Leon with respect to seat 15. Now, with respect to the answer, and actually all the answers to these recommendations, I suggest that we respond just as the recommendation is and not considering what item has not said. Yesterday, for example, in the first draft, we made some observations, and these observations were not really taken into account. So if we now are saying that you might modify something, I think we should not consider that either, but we should simply answer based on what's on the recommendation.
Javier?
Javier Rojas, for the record, just to point that I see no conflict in this item of conflict.
Well, thank you for bringing the circle to a complete close. Is there anyone who wishes to take any more discussion? Oh, sorry, I do apologise. Tijani, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. It's only to say that I find the text only to say that I find the text sufficiently strong to answer this recommendation, and I don't want it to be changed. I find it very good written. Thank you.
It's delightful to have that sort of comment come in. Thank you. I think stridency is good occasionally. And just as we are about to close, I know that Alberto's card is up, but I doubt that he wants to speak because he's not even there. And I'm going to Satish.
Thank you, Satish, for the record. While we say that we strongly object to the recommendation and random selection is not an acceptable way, we are not saying what is really being violated here. Is it the autonomy of at large? Is it the independence? I think it will strengthen it if we say what is really being violated, rather than saying we don't like this.
Noted. And Alan, it's noted. I'm not sure we need to answer it, but go ahead.
The title of this director slot is the director selected by at-large. To have at-large have no part in that process makes no sense.
To say the least. Tijani, go ahead.
And also, all is said in the paragraph. It is said that it is, we are not represented anymore. It is not us who are selecting our director, so it is not, this is not fair. And at large is not considered in this case.
Right. Holly's hungry, so apparently we're finishing now. Well, that settles that, ladies and gentlemen. Holly's tired and hungry. She's leaving. Does anyone, while she's walking out the door, that is only partially a joke, just by the way, because she just said, I've only got 45 minutes for lunch. Poor you. You have all my sympathy. Is there anyone who wishes to go back to discuss the work group matter any further? Because I thought we fairly much agreed with the understanding of what we were supposed to have, isn't? Okay, I have 2 on the list. I'd prefer to only have 2 on the list, but if you insist on putting your cards up, do so now. I saw Alan and then Tijani and Sean, who may or may not decide to leave his card up for whatever reason. Alan.
Thank you. 2 things. I'll be very brief. There was, again, a statement there that pointed out that work groups are the method that ICANN uses throughout its organization to discuss, make decisions, and come to closure on things. And that's the essence of the multi-stakeholder model. I think that statement needs to be made. Number 2, there was a list of the types of work groups we have and identifying them into 3 categories. It's completely irrelevant for the research, for the review team. They don't give it something, but it's critical if this recommendation is not substantively changed for the next pass. So it needs to be captured. Thank you.
So that's one of those documentary evidence situations. Tijani, and
yes.
Can I ask why you've all put your cards back down again? Is it just to trick me? Go on, Tijani.
Thank you very much, Tijani speaking. I think that an email should be sent immediately to all the ALAC members, because perhaps some are not here, to explain them that they have till today at 8 o'clock in the evening to make comments, and it is very important that they make their comments because it will be their last moment to do it.
I've seen staff take that as an action item already, so that will definitely. Really, if only I've run a meeting before, I might know that.
Heidi just told me.
Thank you, all of you, including you, Heidi. Sean, thank you for taking your card down. We have now completed the amount of time we have for this activity today. And if you want to know what the next steps are, listen over again to what Tijani just said. Goodbye, one and all, and put your hands together for our long-suffering interpreters. IT guys, we love you as well, but we don't thank you to the end of the day. Bye.